Welcome to the Existential Empath Podcast. My name is Tanya, and I am an intuitive empath. My intention is to share valuable tools and techniques that I have learned so you can tap into your own inner healer naturally and intuitively.
Welcome back, everyone. I have guest Donna Conley here with me today. Donna is a life coach, blogger, and author of Wild Moon Healing, which is actually being released next week. And we'll talk a little bit about her book later on in the show. Donna helps people learn a wellness approach to mental health to transform their lives in a more holistic way. Welcome, Donna. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So we are going to dive into overcoming depression, and Donna's going to share her story. And I'm also going to share a little bit of my story too, because I also have overcome depression myself. And we're going to talk about some more unconventional ways of dealing with depression. And we're going to dive a little bit deeper into the underlying root causes or the factors as to why we struggle with not only depression, but other dis-ease and illnesses as well. So Donna, can you just dive a little bit into your story, just guide us through, that time when you were struggling with depression and how you found your way out of it?
Yes, absolutely. Well, the moment I knew I wanted something different for my life happened long before my healing journey. It was overwhelming. I didn't know what to do, where to start, and I didn't know how to change. It's, it was life events. I'm going through the motions. I'm busy. Everyone is busy these days. I was going to school, full-time job, single mom. And I just lost myself.
Yeah.
In the whole hustle and bustle of everything. So the moment when I guess spirituality entered my healing journey, that's when things really started to change for me. Becoming accountable. I knew that what was happening in my life, I created it. And I realized that that meant I have the power to create something different. Mm-hmm. And so I still have no idea what I'm doing. I actually found my very first healing modality, which I did for 2 years straight. I still do it, is EFT. And yes. You're an EFT practitioner. And I started journaling and learning about all these different things. And at first I didn't know what was happening, if it was working, if it wasn't working. And then I started reading through my journaling and I was like, wow, everything is the same in my life. I'm still working, have the same house, same everything, but I was so different. And that was that light bulb that was like, okay, this is how you do it. All the answers I have are inside.
Yeah. So when you were first struggling with depression, and I, like you, I was taking medication to kind of help me get over the hump to get through those days, but the medication wasn't working. And this was 15, 20 years ago when I went through this. And I was recognizing that the medication worked in the beginning, but then as time went on, I started to get very fatigued and sluggish, and I wasn't myself. And I felt like I didn't want to participate in the world. I didn't want to go to my job. I went through all of those emotions that many people go through when they're struggling with depression. You just don't want to engage anymore. You want to disconnect, but you get to a point where you're so disconnected that it's really even hard to connect with people. So how did you make that transition from, doing the traditional route that most people start when they're struggling with depression to diving more into realizing it was your spiritual aspects that needed healing?
Well, I had a lot of things going on at the same time, and I was depressed long before I was diagnosed with depression. In retrospect, I see that. But I kept pushing myself, pushing my limits, maxing out my bandwidth, and my body physically shut down. Yeah. I was in the hospital and literally could barely breathe. It was really serious situation. And at the same time, I was diagnosed with depression. Mm-hmm. Well, I had to deal with these physical things. So my doctor gave me the pills and whatnot and wasn't really working. And she wanted me to go see a psychologist and do talk therapy. I had so much trouble. I don't know if I manifested it not happening,
Yeah.
but I
Or
couldn't
maybe you didn't
find
believe in it
anyone.
when you went
You know,
into it potentially.
and yeah, looking back, I wonder if that was going on, but they wouldn't call me back or they couldn't work with my schedule. And so I was like, okay, I know I can fix me. I just don't know how. And I,
Uh-huh.
you know, just started Googling, and that's how I found EFT. I had no idea what it was and how to do it. And I'm like, okay, I can do this. I can retrain my brain to get rid of the negative and keep all the positive. And yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think for me, EFT, I think was the second modality that I dove into. I learned the art of muscle testing or applied kinesiology first,
Uh-huh.
through the emotion code was what I had learned first. And that really helped me pull out of that lifestyle that I was living. I was completely in overdrive. I was in burnout mode, and I needed to relax, and I was miserable because I was trying to make everyone else happy but myself. And that's a key trait I talk about a lot, being
Yeah.
empathic. You know, we like to make sure that everyone else is pleased around us before we actually take care of ourselves. And you know, that
Yes.
can lead to depression because we are not happy with who we are, where we are, you know, in our life. So, okay. So as you move through the EFT and the journaling, what came next? You know, what helped move you through that depression?
Linking the activities I was doing. So I was doing EFT, journaling, sound healing, listening to things. And when I linked that with the lunar cycles, that's when even my friends were like, what are you doing? Because,
Yeah.
you know, they a change in me. And so I just started documenting what I was doing. I had no idea what I was writing was going to be, you know, the outline for a book, but I was documenting everything and I was giving it to some of my friends. And I'm like, well, what do you think about this? And a lot of them jumped on the bandwagon and, you know, and we all just started doing it together, which really helped too.
Yeah, because you've got a support system there. And so I recognize now, I lived in Florida for 20 years, so I had constant sunlight. It was pretty much the same weather almost year round. Well, when I went through my awakening process, you know, that really fun process that we go through, that healing journey, I moved across the country. I moved to Washington State. And I moved in November. So it was very cold and very dark. And so my body went through shock almost. And I struggled with what's known as seasonal, you know, affective disorder. I didn't even know what this was. You know, I was like, wait a second, what are you talking about? You know, but I got severely depressed in those months leading up, you know, after I had moved across the country. And I didn't even recognize what was happening to me. So I saw, you know, I was looking at your Instagram page and you made a correlation between the moon phases and the seasons. Can you talk about that? Because not everyone tunes into the lunar phases, but we can tune into the seasons. We do recognize, like today being here in the States, right? It's the first day of fall. We do recognize when there's a seasonal transition, but how do we recognize when there's a lunar transition?
Well, I compared a monthly lunar cycle to the entire calendar year. So the spring equinox happens at the beginning of the astrological new year, the beginning of spring, and that correlates with the new moon. So you want to make, a lot of people make New Year's resolutions, but what you really want to do is focus on that spring equinox. And this is what I, you know, really create a big plan for your entire life for the next year, like map it out. And then the fall equinox is equal to the full moon. So right now is a great time for shadow work. And then you have the winter and summer solstice, which are like the quarter moons. And, you know, right now with the Libra and Mercury in retrograde, it's like the perfect shadow moment to, you know, reflect back what's lacking in your life, re-examine where you've come from since spring, reassess. Do you need to shift gears? Do you keep going on your current path? You know, that's the energy is perfect for that right now.
That's awesome. And I know with the Libra, it's the balancing, it's the peacemaker, it's where we find harmony. And it's also love. It's where we tune into that love as well. I mean, when I think of Libra, I think pink, I think rose quartz, I think love, I think romance, you know, all of that. So but it's also balance and harmony within the masculine and feminine energies within ourselves. And so, when you talk about shadow work, do you have some advice for people who are diving into that? Because if we are moving into this lunar phase of the full moon, into the fall equinox, what are some things that we can do to help heal some of those aspects within our shadows?
That's where a lot of the journaling comes from. Some journaling prompts, considering Libra energy and stuff right now to help you reflect on the positive would be like, what relationships do you have in your life that are meaningful and add value? And how do you nurture and strengthen those? And then on the other side is, what relationships trigger you? And what can I learn from those triggers? It's not about the other person or the situation. With Wild Moon Healing, it's always go in. What can you do? Whether it's for you, and it's always for you, but when you take care of yourself, you take care of everybody else. And that's how you find balance.
Okay. And so what I recognized when I went through depression, I noticed there were certain months when it would hit me. January was a big one and August was a big one for some reason for me. So I started to notice routines or patterns or cycles of certain times of year when I would start to get depressed. And then I started to tune into the astrological charts as to, okay, I'm in a Capricorn, shifting into, what is it? I think it's Aquarius. Is it that first one there? And then August August is the Leo energy shifting into more Virgo. So I was kind of noticing the earth sign being attached there. Now I'm a fire sign. So when I would move into those earth signs, I would notice I would get more grounded, but I'd also find myself a little bit more saddened. And so I myself personally, began to chart when my depression would peak. And so I do suggest that, to those of you out there who may be struggling, notice if you're having cycles or loops. And are there times when maybe it's August. For me, August was a really busy time at work, and so was January. So I was also tagging it to having downtime around the holidays and then having to go back to work and starting to pick up that autopilot, stress, burnout, so it would get me really depressed in January. It was not my happiest time. But once I left that job, I noticed that following January, my body still wanted to trigger that depression, but my mind was like, no, we're not doing this anymore. So I would suggest that. And I think that's where you say the journaling can come into play, because it's really being consciously aware of when are you having these bouts of sadness or, rippling through you. And I think the relationship thing is a huge thing too. I'm glad that you brought that up, because Libra is the relationship sign. And so let's talk about that. Let's talk about what the energy looks like moving into the next quarter, I guess, as we're moving into these changes.
Yeah, well, looking at the next whole month coming up, you've got Libra is about the we, right? And then when you get into the Hunter's full moon, that's in Aries, and it's still relationships, but it's about, how do I show up in relationships? So those types of things are what's going to come up. And with today being the equinox, if you're intuitively chimed in to what's going on and your thoughts, you can really have a lot of telling stuff between now and into tomorrow. With the equinox energy.
Oh, absolutely. Because we're in that balancing stage right now. We're in that, they say you can balance an egg, on its, up and down right now. So the energies are good for balance and harmony. And, when it comes to relationships, I had a friend reach out to me last week. She was really struggling with some back pain, and immediately, I was muscle testing. I was working through some things with her, and immediately it triggered a relationship with a friend that she just lost. And so we dove into that, and she was like, this relationship just isn't serving me anymore. And then we dove in a little further, and she had lost her mom a few years ago. And, immediately I picked up on intuitively that you are trying to find female relationships that resemble the deep connection you had with your mom that you have lost.
Yeah.
And she said she just, she went into tears, once we hit on that sweet spot. And so, oftentimes our relationships may not be working because of something deeper, something more,
Yes.
you know, on a soul level or an emotional level or spiritual level, you know?
Yeah.
So I
Yeah,
think, yeah,
definitely.
definitely. And
Well,
relationships are key.
yeah. And going into where everyone is always so busy, go, go, go. And the days get shorter, the nights get longer, and that's for a reason. We need to rest. And people still go, 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 and artificial lighting and whatever it is they need to do, caffeine and stuff to keep going. It's the seasons and your body, it all works together. You know, you're going to be more tired in the winter months because you're supposed to get more rest,
Yeah. And it's
you
like the
know?
winter time, you go within, you look at that nature, look at animals, you know, they're busy, busy, busy up through the fall. And then when winter comes,
Yeah.
they go within, you know, because they've harvested everything, you know, to get them through the winter months. And the sun is, it keeps our circadian rhythm, you know, going. And so, you know, here I live in North Idaho, and we, at our shortest day, it's like 3 o'clock in the afternoon that the sun goes down, you know, in December. And that's a
Wow.
huge transition for me when I moved from Florida, where the sun was up. They call it the sunshine state for a reason, you know? And so, you
Yeah.
know, I see the moon more in the winter months than I see, you know, in the summer. You know, you see the full moons in the summer. You're like, oh, and then the
Yeah.
harvest moon. But in the winter, you see it a lot more. And so, you know, it really shines a light literally on that shadow and how we need to go
Yeah.
within, right? And heal that. So, you know, Donna, tell us a little bit more about these lunar cycles and how you actually learned, you know, how to do this, and, you know, and how to teach people how to tap into these cycles.
Yeah, it was just it's just something that I started doing. So, and I realized I was making all these connections and stuff. I remember my very first aha moment. I was like, "Oh my gosh, my sister and my mom, they're so artistically talented and I can't draw a straight line with a ruler." And I realized I was confusing creativity and artistic ability. And once I made that connection, I opened my creative center and everything just started changing for me. And, you know, and through journaling, I learned to change and shift my perspective. So sometimes I look at the situation, sometimes it's look at how did I react to it. Um, and, you know, a huge trigger for me was in some particular relationships. And the very first time that something happened and I realized I didn't react, I was like, oh wow, this is like really huge for my life. I you
Yeah.
know, I was just like, okay, this happened. And you know, and normally I would have just screamed or something. Yeah, I have no idea what I would have done, but
Uh-huh.
it didn't affect me on the inside. And I was just like, when I left, I was like, wow, that's cool. You know. and
Yeah.
um and so when and as you go through the month and you change your perspective, it really helps you learn about you. You know, why did I do this? What is it about me that draws me to these relationships and this kind of thing? So that became the
Absolutely.
basis for the book. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think too, I know, you know, emotionally, I can tell when a full moon is coming. Not only that, I think as women, we tune into those, you know, the lunar cycles with our periodics, you know, our periods and our cycles, you know, at least I have. I've noticed I've seen a switch from myself moving from a full moon cycle to a new moon cycle. And I don't really recognize when it's happening, but I do track that. But I do notice, you know, triggers will come up more around full moons. I feel like, okay, I'm getting a little bit more
I think,
irritated
well,
or frustrated.
metaphorically, the full moon, metaphorically, it shines light on things. So you see it, it's like, oh, that's why it's not that it's new or wasn't there the day before. It's just that energy helps you see it. So
Yeah, and feel it, because it's like, okay, I
yes.
can. And I worked in a hospital for 20, you know, 15, 20 years. So I also would recognize during full moons, we would get a lot busier in the emergency department. And they say, you know, the word lunatic came from the word lunar, because we kind of feel like lunatics a little bit, you know, during that full moon cycle, because it shines light on things, and it brings those emotions up, you
Yeah.
know, to the surface to be healed. And
Yeah.
so, Donna, let's talk about your book, Wild Moon Healing. So what's the premise of the book? And, tell us a little bit about it.
The whole concept is, if you start following lunar cycles and create your own self-care practice, that way you start taking care of you all day, every month. You're just putting, even if it's 5 minutes, whatever you can find to start off with, and that way when you look at the moon, you look up, it's a full moon, you think, oh gosh, 2 weeks have gone by since I made this intention. I didn't do anything. If you really start to get in sync with it, it really helps you progress. So when you're journaling and you're learning about yourself, you're also working towards whatever your intention or goal was. So you're transforming, and the process of learning and transforming, then the healing just happens organically.
Yeah. And so, you look back at the ancients, they didn't have a calendar cycle like we did. They had a sundial, and then they had the moon, they had the sun, they had the seasons, so they had to pay more attention to the cosmic energies, to the earth energies. And so, like you said, I keep that on my calendar. I know when the full moons are, mainly because of my cycle, but it's like, okay, I can see where you're coming from, being able to track that schedule and saying, wow, it's already a full moon already. Like, so many weeks have already passed, and, here I am. And I feel like just lately, these last 2 months have whipped by. I'm like, where did August go? Where is September's almost done? And, so I do feel tuning into that energy and allowing ourselves to slow down and be in the moment, to be in the now, is crucial, because like you said, many of us are go, 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 busy, 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 and our lives are just passing us by. But it's like, let's just slow down for a minute and take some time for ourselves. I have a friend who, she's like, I don't have time for myself. I'm taking care of my mom. I'm taking care of my family. I'm working. I'm this, I'm that. How do I do self-care? And I'm like, start out with an hour. Just start out with 1 hour, and then add to it, add another hour, and then add another hour. Next thing you know, you have a day. You're like, okay, I have a whole day of self-care, so it's taking those baby steps, because when you're on that go, go, go all the time, your mind is like, how do I find time for this? How do I find time for this? But we prioritize time. And, and I think when you slow down and you journal and you are in that moment, it allows yourself to reflect back and say, wow, I've been really busy and I'm not taking care of myself the way that I should be. And I need to make some changes. And it sounds like that's what you did. And, when you're in that deep, dark depression. So is there any advice that you can give to people when they are in that place? Because some people will I was like that for a little bit. You get into that place of depression and you don't even want to get out of bed, so is there any advice you can give to people?
Well, at the worst of mine, if I opened my mouth, I just started crying. I couldn't even speak, and I didn't know what was going on. And subtle, like, if you don't have to be that bad, but subtle things would be, if you say yes to make plans, but you often renege and cancel. You can go to work all week, but if you can't get out of bed on the weekend, something's wrong. These little, and it might not be, some people say, well, I just don't feel like myself today. Yeah. Well, if you don't feel like yourself, then you're feeling like what? Someone else's opinions, are you feeling like the stress in your job? The first thing I would say is go to your doctor. Very small thing you can start to do to just help calm yourself. At night, everyone goes to bed and everyone gets up, right? So when you go to bed, lay there and do like a body scan. Just feel your body and see what pings, even your thoughts, whatever comes up, it's okay. And maybe even practice some gratitude as you're laying there too. Just come up with 3 to 5 things that you appreciate about the day. And then when you wake up in the morning, kind of do the same thing, do some sort of relaxation, feel your body. Okay, I'm awake, and, just start, find something that you're going to be excited about that day.
Yeah. And I think it's just taking that first step. And for those of you who have watched my videos and understand what EFT tapping is, you can lay in bed and start tapping. Even though I don't feel like getting out of bed today, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. even though I feel really sad and tired right now, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. And I think that's the benefits of tapping, or even muscle testing. Start muscle testing if you know how to do that. Learn it. These are simple, easy techniques that you use your hands for. And that's so simple. And you can just lay there in bed, while you're in that emotion. And what it's going to do is it's going to move energy out, and it's going to lift that energy, from you. And had I had these tools and techniques back when I was struggling with depression, I would have probably moved through it a lot faster than it took me to get through that. But, I guess we all go through our own journeys, right? And yours led you to the moon, and mine led me to energy. And
yeah. And the funny thing is, when I had all that medical problems 6 years ago, I literally not even 2 weeks ago, I was diagnosed with Lyme disease. Oh, yeah. So I got angry. I was like, I have been in pain for 6 years. And that anger, the energy of that anger just opened up that old neural pathway. My migraines came back and I binged. That's my go-to emotional release. But I saw it and I was like, whoa, Donna, you can't do this. So I journaled and everything, and I rewrote my story. And I'm like, okay, physically I've experienced acute pain and chronic fatigue, but these symptoms weren't the disease. It was my cure. It was my emotional cure. Because if I was diagnosed with Lyme disease 6 years ago, I wouldn't have, I'm sober. I haven't had a cigarette in 6 years. I grieved my brother. I mean, the list is, it's so many things. I addressed depression and all these insights to my emotional binge eating and all these things that have happened for me over the last years. It had to happen.
Yeah.
So that's when I rewrote that story. The anger's gone. It's like, okay, now I can deal with my physical health, but I had to go through that physical pain to get that emotional healing that I really desperately needed.
Yeah. And half the battle is being aware of the loop pattern. Like, you caught yourself in the loop and you said, okay, I see myself spiraling in this direction. I know where this goes. I don't want to go there again. How do I change this? What do I do? And, and I think it's frustrating when you move through those deep healing processes, and then you get to a point where you're like, I feel great. And then boom, something hits you again. But you have the tools now to be able to move through it in a different capacity or different consciousness than you did 6 years ago. And that in itself is something to give yourself a pat on the back, about, because you that shows growth, and that shows that, no, I'm not going to let this diagnosis, take me over, and I'm going to move through this, and I'm going to move through it differently. And I think that's awesome that, it's not awesome that you came down with Lyme disease. And my dad was diagnosed with that. And if you have not heard of the medical medium, Anthony Williams, I highly encourage you to read up on him. My dad has healed himself from prostate cancer, Lyme disease, and Epstein-Barr virus. And I'm probably going to do a podcast on this. Yes. And he too was defeated. It was like he got over the prostate cancer, and then bam, 3 or 4 years later, it was Lyme disease. And he's like, what? And so it's all a part of the journey, but I do feel like it's layers. It's like sometimes these things lay dormant in our cells, and then as we bring them up, like onion, layer after layer, it's like, okay, here we are. We're going to present you with this, and now we're going to move through it. And so he successfully healed himself from Lyme disease, and you will too. You will too. And I have every faith in you that you will do that, and you will use all the tools and techniques that you have, on hand. So, Donna, so how can people find you? How can people reach out to you? How can they learn more about your book? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I have a website, wildmoonhealers.com. The same, I have a Facebook page, Instagram under the same name, Wild Moon Healers. My book releases officially next week on the 29th, but you can purchase it now on Amazon. And it's called Wild Moon Healing. And yeah, so very exciting. And my, my dream for the world is to just eradicate things like alcoholism, type 2 diabetes, suicide. And this book is just my little ripple in the pond that someone's going to read this and it's going to help them get through it. And that has, generational effects,
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And I think that's why we're all here. We're here to go through our own journey, and then we share what we've been through. And then if it helps others, it helps others, and I thank you so much for coming on the show.
yeah.
I appreciate you for being vulnerable and sharing your story. I know that's not always easy to do, especially when we're talking about mental health. And, I send so much uplifting energy to you and what you're doing in your book. And, all of you listeners out there, go out there and check out her book, Wild Moon Healing. You can find it on Amazon. So thank you so much for coming on the show today, Donna.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
You deserve to navigate your life as an empath in alignment with health, happiness, and abundance. To learn more about the services that I provide, including Beyond Quantum Healing Hypnosis, EFT Tapping, and the Emotion Code, visit my website at www.thesoulcafe.org.